and welcome to another episode from Mason History Headquarters and on our political beginnings, the democratic history of the United States. So at the beginning of the Revolutionary War, the colonists rose up and to fight for their freedom, to make sure that the British didn't take away their liberties. But where did these liberties even come from? Democratic ideals had been in the world since way before the colonies began to be established. You have the Greeks, and then of course the Romans. They're influenced by the Greeks, and both of them continue to influence democracies around the world throughout history. Even some of the first colonies coming to the New World had a democratic history. You have your first settlement in Roanoke, Virginia, which really didn't turn out very well. Basically, they didn't know anything about the landscape, did not have enough supplies, sent supply ships back home, and by the time the supply ships got back, well, everyone was gone. It's still one of the weirdest mysteries in history. You gotta learn more about it. But then we have other colonies that came, were not deterred. You have the settlement in Jamestown that actually flourished after a really harsh winter, but they've actually felt like it was possible to establish colonies in the New World. So more came. You have then the Pilgrims in the Plymouth, Boston area and Cape Cod, and they were successful and be able to flourish. And then their close cousins, the Puritans in Upper Massachusetts and Boston, they were kind of crazy. You should definitely check out more about them and the Salem witch trials. But more and more people coming to the New World to establish their colonies and their settlements until it grew to the 13 colonies. And they really prided in their governments that they were establishing with the democratic history. And they were establishing colonial legislatures, and these traditions were continuing that they brought from England. So what are those traditions? Well, you have to kind of look at the three main ones that were important to the colonists. And the first is an ordered government. And that basically looks at the fact that you need a government that is going to be ruled. It's going to have law, and it's going to be specific and managed. And then you have to limit that government, and you have to make sure that there are not only rules that the citizens have to abide by, but that also the government has to abide by, that they do not have this overarching, unending power over all of its people. And then the final one, which is a representative government, was bringing the ideas that you had people that were going to do the will of the citizens. They were going to be the ones to serve the people. So it all started in 1215. And that's where we really have to go back to understand these traditions and these ideas that they brought. When you have a king like King John, who was oppressive and he would tax the people, and he had very, very dumb military campaigns and had a lot of arbitrary ideas about what he was able to do. So the nobles decided to make him sign the Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta was one of the first written documents that started to limit the power of the monarch. It's kind of revolutionary in itself, even though no real revolution occurred. There was no change in power. But the Magna Carta established a couple of main points that haven't been important since, and that is the trial by jury and due process of law. Now, at the beginning, this was only for noblemen, but it became one of the most upstanding documents in British history and became available to everybody. And then you have, as a few hundred years pass, another king, of course, that decides that he doesn't need to go by the rules, and that is going to be in 1628. And Charles was just like King John. So they made another document to limit the power of the king called the Petition of Right. And in the Petition of Right, they really reestablished what was established in the Magna Carta, but added a couple of things. In this document, they added that the king could not imprison or punish people without first following laws. So if he just wanted to basically take away their land or take anything they wanted and their titles, he couldn't just do that without due process of law. So then they also said that he couldn't declare military rules in time of peace. So that's housing soldiers in people's homes whenever he wanted without the approval of Parliament. He also was restricted of his taxation power, which then now put it on Parliament, the representative power. So if you think about it, this Petition of Right was where they got the whole idea, no taxation without representation. So even that wasn't new. And then about 60 years after that, we have another king who did not observe the rules in 1689 with the Glorious Revolution against another King Charles. Look up on that. The Glorious Revolution is interesting. Well, Parliament appointed William and Mary as monarchs if they signed the new document, the English Bill of Rights. So the English Bill of Rights was there to again limit the power of monarchs and to keep them from abusing it, and also required consent, again for taxation, and also promised fair trial, and of course petition rights to the monarchy. So all of these powers and these rights that the colonists really were establishing that they had were all influenced by these three documents that we call the landmark documents. And as you can see, many of them were trial by jury and due process and this right of private property and no cruel and unusual punishments. They were all established before the Bill of Rights and before 1787 when we were writing the Constitution and adopting our own Bill of Rights. So these traditions that the colonists brought to the New World were really important and lasting traditions that they felt were important as we were establishing our own governments. So by 1777, the 13 original colonies, as you can see in this map, were mostly royal colonies, which means they were under the direct rule of the king. Charter and proprietary colonies had some sort of independence, but by the onset of the Revolutionary War, any of these charters had been revoked by the king and were now taken under direct rule, which was organized with the colonial government as seen in this chart, that establishes that the king is the overarching authority. Then there's a governor below them who is chosen by the king. And then you have, of course, one house of legislature that is organized by the governor and appointed, very much favorites of the governor and king. But you also had a lower house that were elected representatives by the people. And this is really where it becomes the focus point of much of the unrest leading to the Revolutionary War is this group of representatives. So make sure to check out the next video when we talk about what makes those colonists so dang angry on Mason History Headquarters.